from St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. We're going to take the next hour to listen back to a recent conversation I had with St. Louis native Areva Martin. Her new book is Awakening: Ladies, Leadership, and the Lies We've Been Told. Areva Martin is a Harvard Law School graduate, a civil rights attorney, a CNN legal analyst, and an entrepreneur. She also founded the Los Angeles-based law firm Martin & Martin, LLP, the autism nonprofit Special Needs Network, and the health technology company Butterfly Health, Inc. This November, I had the chance to talk with Areva here at St. Louis Public Radio before a live audience. Her book, Awakening, details the awakening she had and the one she says we all need to have. So I started our conversation by asking her to take us back to when she had her awakening, around the time she graduated from Harvard Law School.
And it was at that point that I started to realize that despite the hard work that I had done, despite the credentials, and the accomplishments that I had as a law student, that there was something else in the workplace that was not about me and not about the work that I did, not about the credentials or the expertise that I had, but it was really about the system and a structure that was set up that I didn't have a lot of control over. So that was when I started to think about these issues, and they really became crystallized for me as I navigated my career, and then more recently as we all went through this pandemic, had time to reflect, saw this country respond to the murder of George Floyd, start to have these uncomfortable conversations about structural and systemic racism. And I saw so many parallels between what happens to women as what we know happened to people of color oftentimes, particularly people, of African-American people in particular.
So I want to go back a little bit on your story because I feel like it's important to understand where you came from to this awakening and what ended up happening in your life that brought this home for you. You grew up right here in St. Louis.
Yes, I grew up in the Carr Square Village mostly, and then I lived in the Jefferson Cass community before, and then I lived briefly in the Jennings community before I went to college in Chicago.
And you wrote that your grandmother and your godmother, they kind of gave you this idea that if you worked really hard and if you were a good girl, that was what it was going to take to sort of rise above what were pretty humble beginnings.
Yeah, and that's one of the first lies. So I did an interview with a friend on a station, and he says, Areva, this book should be 6,000 pages. Like, there are a lot of lies beyond the 5 that women are told. And yes, this is not meant to be a comprehensive and dispositive list. It's just, the things that were told to me most often. And yes, the hard work. I pride myself as a Midwesterner on being a really hard worker. So I'm not suggesting that hard work is not important, but there was an additional part to that story about hard work that wasn't told to me, and I think isn't told to many women, and it's those meetings that take place outside of work. It's those deals and those contracts and those negotiations and things that are happening while oftentimes women are at the office, head down, working hard, doing the work, and men often are in those closed door sessions on the golf courses, in those cigar bars, in those other places and spaces. And so that was the part of it that wasn't told to me, and I think is often not told to many women.
And I think about your grandmother. I mean, she must have experienced some things and lived through some things in life where she had seen that hard work wasn't enough, but maybe she had hope that for you things would be different.
Well, I think that's true, but I think, as growing up as an African-American woman, girl, we in our culture are told, we tell our children, our grandparents tell us we have to be twice as good, we have to work twice as hard, we have to be better. And that is, an important part of our culture and our tradition. So yes, that may have been what she experienced, but also what had been told to her through generations was work hard, work hard.
And so you were twice as good. I mean, you're the girl who went from Carr Square to Harvard Law School. I mean, that's tough.
Yeah, I don't know if I was the girl that was twice as good. I'll just say I was the girl that had a lot of lucky breaks and definitely worked really hard, took to heart those lessons and tried to apply them and, had some incredible opportunities. So.
And then you write in your book, a black woman with Harvard credentials is still a black woman.
Yeah.
What did that end up meaning in your case?
That means that no matter how successful you are, and I told this to the seniors and juniors that I talked to this afternoon at Rosati, that it doesn't matter. We hear President Obama talking about being racially profiled. We watched what happened to First Lady Michelle Obama when she became our First Lady, all the vicious attacks that were directed towards her. So in this country, race matters, and it matters no matter how successful you are. So that's important. That's an important part of the book, is talking about that intersectionality between gender and race.
And so did you find yourself turned down for jobs that, say, a white man who went to Harvard, he might have just sailed right in?
Oh, absolutely. I found myself being passed over for promotions when I was working in the corporate environment, watching white men be promoted and have opportunities that weren't afforded to me when I started my own practice. And I was getting contracts before I really turned my focus to civil rights in my practice. We did a lot of work where we were counsel for corporations. And I found that I was offered less money for the same contracts that were being offered to my white counterparts for more money. And I actually had a white woman friend of mine from Harvard tell me, she was in-house at one of these big firms, and she said, Areva, don't accept that fee, because that's not what they pay the white lawyers that they hire to do the same work. They pay them a lot more, and you need to, stand your ground and, demand that you be paid what they're paying.
And did that demand work? I mean, you were able to push. No.
I didn't get the work.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out that way.
I was going to say, that's a tough thing. I mean, here you're given kind of this inside intelligence, like they're not valuing you enough. And so you come in confident. You've got to value me the way you'd value me if I was a white man or if I was even a white woman. And it doesn't work.
No.
What do you do with that then?
You find other things that do work. I mean, and that's a part of, finding your voice and standing up for yourself. It's not always going to work out. You're not, sacrifices were made for us to get where we are. So sometimes this involves some personal sacrifices. And one of the things that I interviewed a lot of women for the book, and people often ask me, what was the recurring theme from the women? And that theme that I heard over and over again from women was that they wish, when they were in a workplace where they experienced microaggressions, or they were passed over, or they were just, blatantly discriminated against, many said they just walked away quietly. Mm-hmm. They left. They didn't, file a lawsuit. They didn't make a complaint to HR. They didn't even, as much, in some cases, tell their bosses. They just left. And they accepted what was given to them. And many regretted that. I would say most of them regretted that. They regretted that they didn't stand their ground, that they didn't speak up. And they recognized that it may not have changed things. They may not have, gotten the promotion. They may not have gotten the raise, but they think it would have made a difference for someone else and created a better pathway for women who were going to, come behind them.
And so for you, as you write in the book, you ended up starting your own firm. You basically realized this big corporate law firm, they don't want me. This isn't going to work.
This isn't going to work.
It was that your way of doing what you just said those other women did. You kind of walked away. You didn't fight at that moment.
Well, walking away was fighting.
Yeah.
So I created, I realized for me, I had this opportunity to create my own path where I could hire people myself. I could be an employer. I could choose the kind of work that I did. I can, represent the kind of cases that I wanted to represent. So, fighting comes in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. So that for me was the ultimate way of standing up.
So I feel like for a lot of women, when there's that point where you don't get the promotion or you're not paid what you're worth, you start thinking, okay, it's me. Like, mm-hmm. I'm not good enough, or frankly, the voice I hear in my head sometimes, I'm not likable enough. Did you struggle with that yourself, thinking, not realizing these bigger forces that were there?
Yeah, absolutely. And now we call that the imposter syndrome, right? And women, there are books written about it, and people go to counseling about the imposter syndrome. Absolutely. I don't think anyone, man or woman who has achieved any level of success in their career hasn't had that moment where they felt like, I don't deserve it, I'm not good enough, I can't do it. Mm-hmm. So yes, I've experienced those same feelings and thoughts, and they can be crippling. You hear a lot of women say that they are absolutely a detriment or an impediment to them, achieving success.
So how do you push past that? How do you get to the point where you say, you know what, I'm not just going to stick around here and be undervalued. I'm going to go start my own firm. I believe in me.
Yeah, and I don't want to oversimplify that, and I don't want to suggest that every person is in a position to do that. And you would ask about, feeling like you're not the right person or you're not good enough. And a part of why I was writing this book too is to push back on that narrative. You think back to the early 2000s, there were a lot of books written, Lean In, and books that, followed Lean In, which told women that we needed to do more. We needed to work harder. We needed to be more strategic about our careers, take more assignments. And I wanted to shift that narrative because, as we all know, we already work so hard. We already do so much. And I wanted the paradigm to shift so that women would know we are enough. And it's not us. You can't lean into a closed door. So a part of, I think, making that paradigm shift is accepting that and embracing that. And, having your awakening moment where you realize that it's not you that's the problem, but it's these, cisgender, heteronormative, patriarchal system that has been developed that we are a part of.
This hour, we're listening back to my conversation with Areva Martin. The topic is her new book, Awakening, Ladies, Leadership, and the Lies We've Been Told. We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, honoring Arbor Day on April 26th, with an ongoing commitment to sustainable stewardship and conservation of Missouri's forests. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome back. I'm Sarah Fenske. This hour, we're listening to my conversation with St. Louis native Areva Martin. The focus is her new book, Awakening, Ladies, Leadership, and the Lies We've Been Told. In the book, Areva calls out several lies told to women and the lies women tell themselves. That includes the lie that the system works, it just needs to be tweaked. I asked Areva about women stuck in a cycle where they realize something isn't working, but they think if they could just fix this thing or the other, it will work out. I asked her how we can move from considering little tweaks to realizing the situation requires a much bigger shift.
Well, if we look at what we've done through, over centuries and definitely, decades, we've made little tweaks and look where we are. Statistically, I cite in the book. So women are the most educated demographic in the country. Black women in particular are the most educated. We go to college more, we graduate more, but it's not translating. So when you look at Fortune 500 companies, you look at CEOs in the C-suites, there are only 41 women who are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. And of that 41, only 3 are African American. So if you do the math, if we're the most educated people in the country, Black women in particular, then why isn't there parity? Why don't you see, a proportionate number of women in C-suites or in those senior level positions? The math isn't there. It's not translating. So that should be comfort for you that it's not you. It's not you, because you're doing the work, right? They tell us you go to school, that's going to be your ticket to upward mobility. That's how you gain advancement in the workplace. So we're doing that. We've done that, and we're still not seeing the progress in some of those high-level positions.
So we know it's not you. We know it's not just a tweak. We have this awakening. Now, what do we do with that knowledge? Where can we take this country to get to the point of what you're calling for?
Yeah, well, so the book, it's broken into 3 parts. And the first part is exposing those lies. The second part is going through the history of what we've done. And then the third part is celebrating, women who are successful. So I don't want you to think that this is all about the problem because, I'm a solution-oriented person. I think there is a solution for every problem. And so I celebrate those women who, despite the odds, despite the obstacles, are achieving incredible things in their careers. Kamala Harris, our vice president, she and I were, met when we were both in college. And so, I've watched her, just soar in terms of her career. So there are so many examples like that in the book that I cite. So, the book is everybody doesn't have to have the same awakening experience. Mm-hmm. Some people, just by acknowledging that what they've been told, was kind of half truth, is in and of itself could be enough for that person, right? That's already liberating. So they've already had a liberating experience.
Just to understand
it.
the way the world is, that is a victory in and of itself.
Yes, just to say out loud that I'm enough. So that's for some people. Now others, it may take the form of, getting involved in a cause. It may be, writing to your senator now and your congresswoman and saying, or man, saying, pass this human infrastructure bill and make sure that paid family leave is in the bill. Make sure that, provisions for child care, the universal pre-K and some of those other things that we know are going to make a world of difference for women, make sure those things are included in the bill. So, people will have their own awakening experience.
So I want to talk about one thing that is almost a leitmotif running through this book. It's a theme that sort of just keeps coming up again and again, and that has to do with the Me Too movement. I mean, this was so galvanizing for so many women. And yet, for the women who decided to speak out about this, there was a great personal cost for many of them. And I'm wondering how you think about that calculation of when you have to sort of protect yourself and decide to swallow, just the terrible things that life puts in front of you versus saying, you know what, I'm going to come out swinging. I'm going to go public with what I know.
Yeah, it's not an easy decision. So a lot of the legal work that I do, I've actually represented women who have been sexually harassed, have experienced, sexual, assault, sexual discrimination in the workplace. And many of them chose to have a conversation with a lawyer, but not file an actual lawsuit. Others chose to file a lawsuit and enter into early settlement that included a private, arbitration or mediation agreement. And
something where they can't later disclose what they
know.
know.
Something that they can't disclose, something that the company can't talk about. And we saw that come up a lot in this Me Too era where there were prior complaints against a man, but those complaints were swept under the rug. He wasn't reprimanded for them, and they weren't made public. So we've seen that happen, and that's a personal choice. So I don't say, and even women consult me in my law practice, every woman is different. Some people coming public, making yourself vulnerable in that way, being attacked, because we know oftentimes when women do come forward, it's gotten a little better, but women were maligned. They were attacked. Their credibility was attacked. They were, called promiscuous. People would dig into their backgrounds, try to find anything to make them out to be the villain, and that can be emotionally and psychologically devastating. So going through that process, everybody has to decide if they have kind of the internal fortitude, I'll call it, to withstand that. And some will say yes and will be completely vulnerable and, go on the media circuit, go on social media and talk about it very openly and very privately, very publicly. But what we have seen in the Me Too movement is the power in numbers. And oftentimes it just takes that one person to come forward, and then you'll see others be empowered by that one person's testimony, and then they start to share. So,
you mentioned these non-disclosure agreements, and as a lawyer working on these cases, it sounds like this is something you have seen time and again. That has to be so frustrating for the part of you that's an activist and wants to see things change, that people are able to sweep that under the rug. Do you think that's changing now, that companies have a better sense of that's something that has to go if we want justice for, frankly, the women in these situations as well as the men who have caused these problems?
No.
No.
No, it's not changing. This country likes to, there's a lot of performative things that happen. So, a big case happens in the media. There's, wall-to-wall coverage for a day, 2, maybe 3 days. And then things have a way of, settling down and going back to normal.
Yeah.
And so, quite honestly, no, there hasn't been a huge shift in the way these cases are handled in the workplace. And still, African-American women, women of color, are disproportionately impacted by sexual harassment in the workplace and are least likely to speak up because we are over-indexed in low-wage jobs, and we are often the sole breadwinner of our families. So the risk of speaking up is too great. It could, mean losing that job, means losing housing, transportation, being able to buy food, take care of, your family, et cetera. So oftentimes you don't see those women coming forward. And if you think about a lot of the high profile cases, Gretchen Carlson, these are often very high profile, well-to-do women who have a lot of resources, a lot of support. And not that anyone likes losing a job, but they are typically better suited.
They have a microphone.
They have a microphone.
They
So-
have a little more control over their
Yes.
story.
So Gretchen, loses one job at Fox, and then she's, can travel the country and give speeches, and they have other ways. So that's not a bad thing, but that's just the reality of oftentimes who you see, coming forward and telling their stories.
I thought you had another interesting observation in this book, in that you said when Me Too really became such a big thing, that in many ways men didn't fight back so much as they retreated. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. When you think about the Black Lives Matter movement, that's a movement driven by women. You think about so many, like the voting, Black women in particular are credited for the election of Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election. So women, in particular, particularly Black women, we stand up. We're at the forefront of so many of these causes. But when the Me Too movement happened, we didn't see men coming forth talking about how important it was to make these major structural changes and to support women.
And so I know some women where their reaction to that is they want to say, hey, forget those guys. Like, we need to move forward without them. You take a much different tack in your book. You say that we need to find a way to make them partners in women's success and in stopping some of these injustices that affect women. How do we even go about doing that?
Well, I would say forget them too, but remember my math problem, right? So,
Right.
The reality is we can say forget them, but they still control. I think I've read something in the New York Times, like, white men, control 92% of everything that happens in this country. So, you can dismiss them if you want, but it's Senator Joe Manchin who's going to make the final decision about whether we get that paid family medical leave or not. So, I talk a lot about partnerships, and I distinguish that between allies. So we saw, again, with Black Lives Matter after George Floyd was murdered, companies were all, they were buying How to Be Anti-Racist books. They were buying books by Black authors, books about racism. There was this day, on Instagram where everybody had to post a Black square. We saw these press releases, all of this. We stand with, Black Lives Matter. We stand with George Floyd's family, blah, 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 blah. And that was great. Like over $50 billion was pledged by corporations to social justice organizations. But that's a way in many cases just to check the box. Mm-hmm. We pledged the money, we posted the Black square, we issued the press release. And then what you started to hear were people inside these companies saying, well, wait a minute, that's great that you gave $5 million to the African American Museum in D.C., but we got a problem right here in our own workplace, where African Americans feel like this environment is hostile, where they don't feel like they can, they're not getting the promotions, they're not getting the support. And there's a recent study out that says Black women in particular feel the most undervalued and undersupported in the workplace.
So this is a very real problem. How do you go about getting then that true partnership from men, from getting them to be the partner, not just the ally trying to look good?
Yeah, you got to have these conversations, right? It starts with you can't fix a problem that you don't acknowledge. And then when I talk to groups, corporate groups, I try to personalize it for men. I ask them to think about their daughters. Think about your daughter who you love, your baby girl who you are so proud of when she, gets on the cheerleading team, when she gets accepted into college, when she, all these wonderful things happen to her. Do you really want your daughter to walk into a workplace that's hostile to women? Do you want your daughter to be, sitting next to a guy that she trains and that guy gets a promotion and she gets passed over? So when you get guys thinking about, that this is going to impact them and someone they really love, like their precious little babies, I start to see like a twinkle in their eye, start to see things start to move and they start to, I think, understand it and receive it in a different way.
You had some interesting analysis in your book of when to clap back and when not to clap back. And I want to read here an email that you got that kind of went viral a little bit because of how you handled it. I'm sure you know what email I'm about to read here. This came in when you had gone on CNN and you were talking about the Me Too movement. This email says, "Dear Ms. Martin, I would respectfully suggest that your attire for these interviews, especially on this topic, should be more modest. This morning on CNN, you had on a top that revealed substantial cleavage, which some," and you can tell this email writer, some, not me, who would wrongly discount your message, would say serves to further objectify women. So here's an email coming in from someone going, some people might say this about your outfit. How did you respond to this email?
So first of all, think about this. This is some anonymous person that doesn't know me from Mary, Jane, Joseph, anyone. They had to take the time to Google me, find out like how to get in touch with me. And this is always surprising to me, particularly people that want to criticize you, attack you, that like you're sitting at home with nothing better to do in your life than to Google me, find my email address and write me. And that's a short email. I mean, some of them are like books on tape. Really lengthy emails. I responded to that person who was attacking me and trying to shame me, which happens a lot to women. Never has a man, been told, wow, that shirt button is a little too low. You need to button up that shirt.
It's just racy.
Yes. That chest that you were revealing in that interview. But the irony was I was talking about the Me Too movement and women being shamed and women being attacked. And in doing that, here I was being shamed for a top. And, I've been working on TV for many, many years. And trust me, you're not going to find me on TV doing anything other than being my authentically, professional self. And how much skin I choose to show is between me and my skin. So
you didn't. So you didn't just send a personal response. You ended up writing an essay about this.
Yeah, I took advantage of it. It's an opportunity to turn everything into a teachable moment. So I wrote an article and published it in CNN on CNN.com, and that's the article that went viral, is to talk about just what women experience. And that's just one of many, many examples of women from their hair, the color of your hair, the texture of your hair. We have the Crown Act, which was enacted in California first by a senator that I worked really closely with, Holly Mitchell. And it's an act. We needed a whole law to prevent companies from discriminating against women of color for wearing natural hairstyles. So literally, before the Crown Act was enacted, you could be disciplined for wearing cornrows, twists, braids, natural hairstyles.
I mean, this obsession with women's appearances, you point out
crazy.
how dumb it is. You also point out how expensive it is.
Well, yeah, that's the other lie. We're told that, beauty doesn't matter, that it's our merit, it's our expertise, it's what we bring to the workplace. But there are all these studies that show just the opposite. Studies that show, your skin tone, that women who are, particularly if you're Black, if you're lighter skin tone, your salary is higher than women who are darker skin tone. Your weight, women who weigh less. So there are these Eurocentric standards of beauty that, have been imposed on women, and we're on this constant treadmill trying to keep up. And I talk about, these beauty trends in the 70s and the 80s, was the waif look. So women literally were taking skin, fat out of their cheeks and trying to, out of their rib cage to get super skinny. And then, here comes the Kardashians and Cardi B and Beyonce and other pop, culture figures. And now women are literally taking fat out of their breasts and shooting it in their butts in these Brazilian butt lifts, these very dangerous surgeries, because now, it's not in to be thin. Now it's in to be voluptuous, and, you have to have it in the right place. It's got to be in your butt, your thighs. Women places that
win.
Women have had weight all our lives, but now all of a sudden it's popular, and women are on this constant treadmill, keeping up with these beauty trends.
Yeah. I mean, so what's the solution there? I mean, can we all just
Get
say,
off.
get off?
So
I'm not going to wear makeup.
off. So yeah, get off. Like hair for me now is like an accessory. So this is my hair today. If you saw me on CNN this morning, I had different hair. If you see me tomorrow on CNN, it's going to be different again. So just, do you? Yes.
Yeah. We're listening this hour to my conversation with author and lawyer Areva Martin, recorded this past November before a live audience. We'll get back to the discussion after a short break. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. This hour, we're listening to my conversation with St. Louis native Areva Martin. She's talking to us about her new book, Awakening: Ladies, Leadership, and the Lies We've Been Told. In the book, she describes her journey to finding herself in new ways over the past couple years. She writes about having an absolutely terrific 2018 with things firing on all cylinders. Here's Areva on why 2018 was such a banner year.
I had my book, Make It Rain, came out in 2018. I started this talk show called Face the Truth. I was hosting on CBS. And just my career, things were going really great. The nonprofit that I work in, that I started, Special Needs Network, we were, doing really well financially. We were moving towards opening this incredible center, autism center. So things were going well.
And then
life. My show got canceled. Our project got held up. Our project still isn't completed yet. But stuff happens. And I wrote about, I think I shared that my 2018 was so great. I had these super, super ambitious goals for 2019. So all the stuff I did in 2018, I was going to do that on steroids in 2019. And I looked back at the end of 2019 and looked at that list, because I'm a list person, I'm a write it down person, and I hadn't accomplished one of those goals. I was like, nope, not that, no, not that. So I was like, okay, 2019, didn't do any of that. So I said, okay, maybe these weren't 1 year goals.
Yeah.
Maybe these were 2 or 3 year goals. So maybe I would extend these so it didn't feel like failure. It just felt like I needed an extension. I needed more time.
But this is the part that kind of breaks my heart the most, is I imagine as you're doing that sort of year-end tally in 2019 that you're saying, okay, next year's going to be my year. 2020, you're going into 2020, guns blazing, like ready to take things. And 2020 was such a reset for all of us. I mean, so many things were so out of all of our control. And so when you're sort of going into this and this is the year I'm going to make everything happen that I've always wanted to happen. And then the whole world comes to a screeching halt. How do you even begin to deal with that?
Well, it started with a lot of wine and potato chips, to be honest with you. That became my Netflix diet. I was binging on everything from the Tiger King to the Queen of the South to, Ozark, all the big popular Netflix specials. And then, I said, okay, this is going to be a little longer because in LA, they shut things down. Initially, it was going to be 2 weeks, then it was going to be 4 weeks. So I thought I could, potato chip and wine for a couple of weeks, then I'd get back to the gym. And then as I realized, no, this is going to be a while, and maybe my potato chip and wine diet should.
Got to desist that.
Yeah, I got to end the potato chip and wine diet. So I think we all had to make the adjustment that this is going to be here a lot longer than we expected. And we've just got to figure out a way to be productive despite the pandemic.
And you feel that there is some good that has come out of this.
Oh, God,
no disrespect to any of the tragedy that people have suffered, but that there's some lessons that you took from this time.
Yeah, definitely. Let's start with the 700,000 people that have lost their lives.
Yeah.
I've interviewed on my show tons of people who've lost, mothers and fathers and families even who have had multiple people die of COVID. So never wish this on anyone. So I don't want to, trivialize the pandemic because it's been very serious. But it has caused us to have this shift in the workplace. Everybody went home. And now we saw the great resignation, they're calling it. And people aren't going back to work in the same way that they did pre-pandemic. We see this shift where employees now have more power and they're saying to their employers, one, either I'm not coming back at all, I've had time, I've been able to reflect on what's important to me, and this job isn't. For a lot of people, they made that decision. And others are saying, I want to come back, but I want things to be different. And employers are having to yield to those demands. They're having to recognize, for years women fought to have flex time, to be able to work from home, to be able to have a flexible schedule. And we were met with so much resistance. But the pandemic showed the world that we can all work from home. I mean, companies made so much money. So many companies made just billions and billions of more money than they ordinarily would. People were more productive. And so a lot of folks are saying, I'll go back, but I want different terms. Higher pay, more benefits, and a less hostile work environment.
And so almost maybe this idea that there almost needs to be, terrible things are going to happen in life no matter what, but some of these terrible things hit home the things that are necessary to get to that awakening.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we always want to try to find a silver lining in things. I think that's by nature, that keeps us hopeful. And that's one of the things. And obviously the need to focus more on public health and what public health looks like, how to be prepared for a pandemic. So I think there's some lessons that we're all learning from it.
There was also another awakening that I think happened in this country during this time. And I think for St. Louis, this was a reminder of an awakening that St. Louis began to have back in 2014. And this was what happened with the death of George Floyd. And I know that you were very active around the time of Ferguson and have continued to stay active on this topic. But it feels like a lot of people really took their eye off of that issue for a long time. And this forced people to get back into it. Do you think that this is going to make change in a way that people were hoping would happen in 2014? And then in many places, things just petered out.
Sarah, I have to say no again. Sorry. I would say no and yes. Okay, so here's the no and the yes. We definitely saw people having to grapple with these big, thorny issues around race, structural racism, systemic racism. White people were asking their Black friends, what do I do to be an ally? Help me I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I have a better understanding. People wanted reading lists. They were attending lectures. Big companies were bringing in all of these diversity specialists. So there was this kind of busyness that was happening. But now there's the backlash from that. We saw what happened in the Virginia election. We see what's happening around voting rights. We see what's happening with the Texas abortion laws. And in many ways, that's the response. So in this country, we tend to make, a little progress, and then there's backlash and there's regression. So I think the jury is still out on what real change might look like. Minneapolis, I'll give you an example, where George Floyd was murdered, May 25th, 2020. Their city council came out initially and said they were going to reimagine their police department. They were going to dismantle it in its present form, create a public safety department where things like mental health and routine traffic stops would be handled by people other than the police. At first, a lot of support for that. That was on the ballot on Tuesday.
And that went down.
It went down in flames.
Yeah.
And so the status quo in Minneapolis, the epicenter of the conversation around policing brutality, voters rejected it.
Yeah. So that actually brings me to a great quote from your book. You write, "Awakening is not about rising one morning and staying awake. It's about rising up every single day." And I appreciate that. I now have that on a Post-it because I'm like, you got to get up every single day. And yet I wonder for people in this room, maybe especially for Black women in this room, how do you keep getting up when you're tired?
Yeah, no, we often say we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but we are from such a rich history of resilient people, which is why we are here. And we stand on the shoulders of those people and we honor those ancestors by getting up every day and recognizing that we may not win the battle, but, we are still in it to win the war. So it's challenging, surrounding yourself with positive people, having a why, whether that's your family or, or some cause that you're passionate about, makes that a lot easier. But we know historically we're never going to stop getting up.
So what would you say to somebody who's listening to this today and they're still grappling with their awakening? They're grappling whether they're ready to take this step and start thinking about the world the way you think about it. What's the message you'd want to leave with them?
First of all, you don't have to think about the world the way I want to. And I want you to have your own awakening moment and start small. Everybody is not going to get to the same place at the same time. That's not what, awakening is about. But it's about trying to empower you where you are and helping you, whatever it is that has been holding you back. If you can just, make the smallest adjustment to the way you think about the world, the way you think about yourself, then to me, I've been successful. You've had an awakening experience. Maybe for you, it's just that quote that now is on your Post-it that has become your affirmation. Mm-hmm. That makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, okay, that's what I wanted.
Well, so you heard it right there. You just got to find one thing. Yes. Do it for Areva.
Start.
So I have some questions from the audience. I got to ask my questions. I feel like now it's your turn. I'm going to start with a really good one from Erica. Erica writes, I have been called aggressive because I speak my mind. How do you handle men who can't handle an outspoken woman?
Yeah, that happens, and then
that happens. Yes.
So, and if you are a Black woman, that aggressive can turn into, loud, angry Black woman. That racist trope that we are often that often gets assigned to us. That when we do speak our mind, when we do speak up, then there's something wrong with us. And I think, Erica, people have not heard enough from assertive women like you. And in this moment, as more of us are finding our voices and starting to use our voices, it's going to take time. We've got to be patient with our other sex, the men, because a lot of them aren't accustomed to dealing with, whether it's professionally or personally, with assertive women. But you don't stop speaking your mind. You don't shrink to make someone else feel comfortable.
So here's a question that I think is kind of the flip side almost here, and this is from Kim. She writes, women are often not supportive of other women and are often very critical of other women. And so, there's the problem of men can't deal with women being aggressive. Sometimes women are out there striking each other down. Kim wants to know your thoughts on why, and then what could be the solution to this?
Yeah, that's a really big question. And a lot of it's learned behavior. So a lot of how we treat people in the world is how we've been taught to treat people in the world. And the people that teach us, there's a saying that hurt people hurt people. So a lot of the lessons that we're learning about how we treat people are coming from people who've been hurt themselves, and they are hurting other people. So first of all, I'm all about recognition, recognizing that is the reality. And then I also am a firm believer in not confronting people, but talking to people, bringing them into that awareness, because oftentimes people will say, I didn't know that. I have a friend, and a friend of mine in Los Angeles, and she had a tendency to make little comments about things that I found to be undermining. But she's a good friend. So I said, I wondered if she knows that what she is saying is hurtful to me. Mm-hmm. And so I just decided to have a conversation with her about it, to say, I don't think you're trying to do this, because we are really good friends. We do a lot together. We support each other. But when you say these things, this is the impact that it has on me. So sometimes it's just letting someone know that what they are doing is having that impact.
And did that work when you had that conversation?
Yes. And we turned it into a joke. And so now, it wasn't like 100% change overnight. And if she'll say something, I'll say, remember, we had that conversation. And she's like, okay. So yes. Now that may offend someone else. Not to say, again, none of these solutions are going to work 100% of the time in every situation. But a part of finding our voices is being able to say to people, honestly, I'm not comfortable with how you're handling this. Or you said some things that made me a little uncomfortable.
Here's a question from Trudy. She writes, I am a first-year associate at a big corporate firm, something I think you can identify with.
Congratulations, Trudy.
What is your biggest piece of advice for navigating the competing mindsets of dealing with sexist micro/macro aggressions, calling it out versus holding your tongue at work, especially how to react in the moment? That's so hard.
Yeah, it is, because in the moment, sometimes you could say something that might literally get you escorted out the door with security, right? So if you really said what you were thinking, you may not survive. It's emotional intelligence. It's figuring out. It definitely, though, is not being a doormat. And I think those days, for women, we were taught and told to not say anything, to let it go, he didn't mean it. And I give an example in the book with my brother. One of my brothers and I have this company together, and I started the company. I'm the CEO of the company. He works for me. And we were being mentored by this older white guy, and on Zoom, these mentoring meetings. And the guy, the mentor, would never, ever address me. He would never call my name. He would never ask my opinion. But throughout these mentor sessions, he would call my brother's name, no fewer than 10 times during the call, direct every comment to him. If he said something, oh, that's a great idea, he would acknowledge it, he would praise it. So one day I told my brother, I said, do you notice that guy never, ever acknowledges me? He has made me completely invisible. And my brother did what a lot of men do. He says, you're imagining that. That man ain't thinking about you. You just making that up. He didn't call my name. And I said to my brother's name is Rodney. I said, Rodney, first of all, I'm not crazy. So stop with the gaslighting. I know when I'm being ignored. I know when I'm being marginalized. And he's doing that. I said, I want you to do me a favor. Next time we're in a meeting, just make a mental note of how many times he uses your name and how many times he will not and does not use my name. So after the call, and it happened again, he called Rodney's name his usual 10 times, praised him for everything. And even to the point now, it's making Rodney uncomfortable because now he's conscious of it. So he started saying things like, well, Areva started the company. So he's trying to inject in there, like, Areva's the CEO. And didn't matter to the guy. So even
he still wasn't taking those cues.
No, this guy was determined that I just did not exist. And so I had to make a choice, like Trudy in those situations. Do you say something? Do you not say something? So I ended the relationship. I said, I'm not getting on a call with him anymore. You can't mentor me if you don't respect me enough to even see me. So you can't give me any advice. There's no advice that I want to receive from you. So I told Rodney, I said, we're going to terminate the relationship with him because he does not even respect me as a human being, as a living being that's even participating in the calls. So I could have said something to him. I could have said, hello, hey, I'm here too. And as you become more mature in your career and your position, you'll figure out what's the best way to handle those situations. Sometimes it's to terminate the relationship. Sometimes it's to say something openly to that person. But I think the thing you want to do is acknowledge it and don't allow yourself to think that there's something wrong with you or that you've done something to merit that kind of behavior.
I think it's interesting you pulled your brother in, not just because he needed to see this for himself, but also it was good to have a witness.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's, for a young woman at a law firm where I imagine probably very few people look like her, if there's, find your allies and find ways to just confirm you're not crazy.
And, find those mentors. And you're not the first person that this has happened to. Mm-hmm. The fact that this is happening to you means that this is probably systemic to that organization. And you definitely want to find those people that have navigated those waters before and find out how they did it. How were they successful in that environment? Because each environment is different. You may work in an environment where, a woman may tell you, you need to say something to him to set the record straight right now. It just may be that that's the best thing to do.
That was St. Louis native, lawyer, and author Areva Martin. She joined me before a live audience in November to discuss her new book. It's called Awakening: Ladies, Leadership, and the Lies We've Been Told. St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, honoring Arbor Day on April 26th, with an ongoing commitment to sustainable stewardship and conservation of Missouri's forests. ChooseWood.com.